If you're anything like me and you're like most language learners, it's very, very easy to procrastinate. Even if you really want to learn a language, it's so easy just to not do things and to waste time, and inevitably you're not going to make progress in the language if you do this. So in this video, I'm going to talk all about procrastination. I'm going to give you my realistic strategy to stop procrastination, and if you stick around to the end, I'm going to give you a bonus tip that effectively makes procrastination impossible, and you'll see why, because it's actually really easy to do. So let's go. This is the symptom of a bigger problem, but it's probably what you're feeling right now. So here's you have a goal, which is to learn whatever language you're learning at the moment, and then you have a process, which is basically what you're doing to achieve your goal. So I've just written language learning stuff. By language learning stuff, I mean, flashcards, anything you would do to learn a language. And the big problem, the big thing getting in the way between you and your goal is procrastination. So procrastination is putting a big X on this line because it is stopping you from actually getting any closer to this goal. It is stopping you from doing language learning tasks. And of course, these language learning tasks have an ROI, a return on investment, which means they're going to make you better in the language. So we need to find a way to beat procrastination so that we can continue doing language learning tasks. And here is what I'd recommend. You need to understand what the real problem is. So you have perceived discomfort and you have perceived growth when it comes to tasks. The reason you do flashcards or anything like that, the reason you invest time into these things is because you think they will make you better in a foreign language. And you're correct. Things like that will often make you better. If you do flashcards for words you don't understand, you will find it easier to remember them over time. However, there is the other side of the equation, which is discomfort. It's not particularly, although sometimes you will feel motivated to do flashcards or to listen to a podcast, it's not particularly fun to study. It's not particularly fun to listen to a podcast that you don't completely understand all the time. It's so much easier to just do it in English or to do things like, scroll on social media that you actually enjoy that are easy. So the only reason you would actually do things that have a perceived discomfort is because the perceived growth is greater. If I asked you to go run 5 kilometers right now, maybe you're a runner and you enjoy that like me, but for a lot of people, they would absolutely hate to do that. But if I told you if you go run 5 kilometers right now, you'll be a billionaire, basically everyone would do that, even if you were in a wheelchair or had one leg, because the perceived gain is so good that it literally outweighs the perceived discomfort. And that's how all tasks work. The problem is that when it comes to the things that you're doing to learn a language, the perceived discomfort is greater than the perceived growth. And what that means is it's very easy to procrastinate because you see flashcards and anything you're doing in the foreign language as so difficult and so painful, and you see the actual growth you get from it as so little that you don't actually view it as useful, and that's why you procrastinate. So let's do a little experiment. I want you to imagine you sat down to study, and instead of just doing normal studying, you learnt everything 10 times faster. Every single word you encountered, you immediately understood. Every single grammatical concept you immediately understood. And then when you were writing a practice paragraph or something like that, you found that you were like 10 times better at the foreign language just after sitting down and studying. Would you procrastinate? Probably not. If you suddenly got 10 times faster at learning the language, you wouldn't procrastinate because you still have the goal of learning. The perceived growth would be so good. You would perceive that you're making so much progress that it outweighs any discomfort, and you would actually feel motivated and you wouldn't procrastinate anymore. Let's do a different experiment. Imagine every time you did flashcards, you got a dopamine hit. So instead of being bored, you got a massive hit of dopamine. Dopamine's kind of like the fun hormone in your brain, the happy hormone. Like when you eat junk food, for example, you feel you get a dopamine hit and it feels good. It's not really happiness, like spiritually, but you know what I mean. Imagine every time you did flashcards, you got a dopamine hit. Like you got something kind of reward. You got like, I don't know, you got $100 every time you did flashcards. It would be so much easier to do flashcards because of the perceived growth, and you wouldn't procrastinate anymore. Imagine every time you listened to a podcast, even if you didn't understand what the words were, all of the words in the podcast, you saw a little progress bar, which was your ability in the foreign language, and you saw it fill up a little bit. So you could actually tangibly see how much progress you'd made. Would you procrastinate? Probably not, because you could actually see how far you are away from your goal. Maybe the progress bar is like a quarter full. You see it fill up a little bit more, and you can literally rationalize in your head, okay, if I keep doing this, even though it's not fun, the progress bar will fill up like in a video game, and eventually I'll have it completely full, and I'll have achieved my goal. If all of these experiments prove the same thing, that if you implement these things, it's not, you won't procrastinate anymore. And this is very important to understand because it's to do with the solution. If you want to stop procrastinating, you need to raise perceived growth, you need to lower perceived pain, and you also need to boost your discipline. Literally, like in the examples I just gave you, these 3 examples I just gave you are these things that you need to do right now. So if you can increase the perceived growth, which is what I gave in example 1, where you see that you're learning 10 times faster, it'll be so much easier to stop procrastinating. If you can lower the perceived pain, if you can make the habits that you're doing to learn a language easier and more fun, it is so much easier to do them, and it's easier to not procrastinate. And obviously, if you can boost your discipline as well, if you can force yourself to do things when you don't particularly feel like them, that helps as well. So look at this. Perceived growth is going up, perceived discomfort is going down, and the scales are kind of like discipline, where there's a little bit more extra weight. There's a little bit of extra weight on one side, which is discipline, because you're making it easier to do one thing. So here are the actionable steps that I want you to do right now, and this will help you avoid procrastination in the future. Number 1, the first thing I want you to do is to identify one problem right now to do with the language you're learning. So maybe you find it difficult to do verb conjugation or articles, or you don't understand this group of words, like maybe food-related words, you can't remember them all. Just pick one problem, and I want you to write it down right now in your language learning notebook. You're going to make a page called Problem Solving To-Do List, and you're just going to write this problem down. This is really good because it gives you a clear target, a clear thing you need to work on, rather than just floundering around doing stuff in the language. You now know you need to do this to become better at the foreign language. If you don't do this task, you will never reach your goal of being proficient, because people who are proficient are good at whatever you wrote down. The second thing I want you to do is to habit stack one thing you enjoy doing with a specific task. So for example, you might be listening to a podcast in a foreign language. That might be something you do. Habit stack it with something fun. So you can habit stack it with going for a walk. That's what I've started doing. Just pick anything you enjoy and anything in the language, and try and find 2 things that you can put together, and you will find it makes the perceived discomfort go down. It's more difficult to listen to a podcast when I'm just sitting there doing nothing than it is to listen to a podcast while I'm going for a walk, or while I'm eating food, or while I'm going to the gym, or while I'm in the car, because I'm stacking it with something that's fun, or I'm stacking it with something where I can't really do anything anyway, like while I'm driving. So I might as well get it out of the way. The third thing I want you to do is to set short-term goals. And what I mean by this is to set, for example, a weekly goal. So your weekly goal might be to learn this specific thing. It could be, your weekly goal could be the problem you just wrote down in your problem-solving to-do list. It could be mastering verb conjugation or something like that, learning articles in the foreign language you're learning. And if you don't know what those words mean, by the way, don't worry, I've got a link in the description to the Language Learning Accelerator if you want to check that out. It's super useful for anyone looking to learn a language. So yeah, if you want to check that out, you can. But as far as short-term goals go, set one short-term goal for the week and make sure you consistently execute on it. This is good for perceived growth, because if you're consistently executing on short-term goals you set yourself, you will see that you are actually becoming better at the foreign language, and this will raise perceived growth. So can you see through these 3 things? We've raised perceived growth by setting short-term goals. We've lowered perceived discomfort by habit stacking. We've I haven't really talked about discipline, but I'll link my video to discipline in the description if you want to check that out, because it's very important. But these 3 things are overall pushing the perceived discomfort down. They're raising perceived growth, and they will help you stop procrastinating, because you're going to be making so much more progress. It's going to be so much more fun and easy. It's very easy to not procrastinate. And if you stuck around to the end, I've got a bonus tip for you as well. And this will literally make procrastination impossible, because you will constantly be doing something. The number 1 way to avoid procrastination, apart from what I've just talked about, so the number 2 way, is immersion. So what I mean by immersion, I'm not saying you have to go move to the country of the language you're learning. I just mean start doing little things in the foreign language. Immersion literally means, in my opinion, trading things that you do in your native language for doing them in the foreign language. So if you write a to-do list every single day, or you set a daily goal, or anything like that, that's a very easy thing that you can swap to the foreign language, and that way you're effectively always going to be encountering the foreign language. And so procrastination is impossible. Even if you do no study, you've looked at your to-do list every single day that is in the foreign language, and you're improving your brain's ability to remember words in a foreign language, because you're teaching your brain that these things are important. I'll have my video on long-term memory and actually locking in words in the description below, because it's super useful as well. But you can pick one thing. It could be as simple as writing out a daily goal in the foreign language, and you can use Google Translate to help you. And you can write the English translation below as well if you want. But just doing little things like that make procrastination literally impossible. I'll have the full video to that linked below, so I'll have a bunch of videos linked in the description. But guys, that is the video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. I've got my Discord linked in the description, and you can also check out the Language Learning Accelerator if you want. Peace. Have a good one.